Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nele from the Watch Scientists and we wish you a happy new year. Now without further ado, today you join me with the Tudor P01, a very exciting watch and a very unusual watch. And before we get into the video, I would extremely appreciate it if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to our channel, as it helps a lot. But other than that, the video is dissected in a few different sections. First, we'll talk about the unusual looks of the watch. Then we'll go into the materials used for the watch and the dimensions. After that, we'll talk about the movement and the history of the watch. And finally, we'll close off with my final thoughts on who this watch is for and what I think of the watch in general. So, without further ado, let's roll the intro and start the video. So the watch that we have with us today is the Tudor P01, which has been kindly lent to me by a friend of mine, and this is a very unusual looking watch, as I said earlier. Now, when this watch first came out, I think about 1 year ago or a little bit more, I was very unsure what to think of it, and to be honest, I still don't know what to think of it. But let's get into why this watch is so unusual, or what makes it look so unusual. So first of all, it's definitely the lugs, the huge lugs made out of steel that kind of engulf the dial or the entire case. Then we have the crown at the 4 o'clock, which is also a bit of an unusual point. You have it on a few divers watches, but not too many. And then we have a black matte dial and this full patina, plus we have a steel bezel. And all of these components together kind of give it a very utilitarian, very industrial look, which I actually kind of enjoy. And then we also have, in contrast, the red inscription with the water resistance of 200 meters on the dial. Now that sound that you can hear is actually the fire generating heat, so don't worry about that. But apart from the unusual looks, what do we have here? We have a 42 millimeter case made out of steel, stainless steel. It is brushed all over. We have a black dial which has a matte finishing. We have a leather strap, which is very interesting because this is not solely a leather strap, it's actually a hybrid strap. So we have leather on the outside and we have rubber on the inside, and I'll show you that in an instant. It's very interesting actually. I didn't know that before I had this watch in my hand. So we have the leather on the outer side, and we have rubber on the downside of the strap, and that makes it very comfortable to wear. I think Tudor did something amazing here by doing that, and I actually have never seen that before on any other watch. There's probably other watches that have it, but this is the first time I have seen it, and I think it's a great detail that Tudor has done here. So the materials we have here are steel, rubber and leather. Very simple, no special metals, no precious metals. This is a tool watch, and that's exactly the vibe that this watch gives me. So with the screw down crown, this watch has a water resistance of 200 meters, making it a dive watch. It is part of the Black Bay line, and we'll talk about that in an instant. But as I said earlier, it is a tool watch, it is a dive watch. It is very sturdy, it is industrial, it is utilitarian, and that's exactly the vibe that this watch gives me, kind of a vintage looking dive watch. And we'll come to talk about how this watch actually came to be. So this is a very controversial piece, and I mentioned that earlier. The reason why it is a controversial piece is because it stems from a prototype that Tudor has made in the 1960s. Well, that's at least what Tudor claims. So Tudor says that this watch came to be as a prototype for the US Navy. So basically from the 1950s onwards, Tudor produced or issued divers watches to the US government, to the Navy. And in the 1960s, the US Navy required a new watch for their activities. And from that request, Tudor then started doing their research, and they issued kind of a series of prototypes to accommodate the needs of the US Navy. But the interesting part of all that is that the watch, the prototypes actually never went to the US Navy. I don't know for what reason, but the prototype that came to be known as the Commando, the Black Bay P01 Commando, which basically is the watch or the predecessor to this one, never really made it to the US Navy. And so the designs, the projects, the research kind of went into the archives of the Tudor company and was then revived 50 years later, and that's why we have this watch today. So basically this is kind of a reissue of that prototype. The watch came back to life 50 years later, and some slay the watch off for it being a failed prototype, and others embrace the very weird or outlandish look of this watch. So obviously what makes the watch stand out so much is this weird looking lug at the top here. I mean, both lugs kind of engulf the case, as I said earlier, but it has a function. So we have a bidirectional diving bezel, and what this upper part of the lug does, you can actually unlock it, and it allows you to rotate the bezel wherever you want, left and right. And then when you have decided on where you want to position the bezel, you can lock it back into place, which is actually practical for diving and making sure that your time will be measured right. But other than that, let's come to talk about the movement. What caliber do we have inside? So this is a manufacturer in-house caliber, the MT5612, and it is an automatic movement. It's a simple movement. It's the only complication we have in this watch is the date at the 3 o'clock, so nothing special, but it is a very reliable Tudor movement, and it has a 70 hours power reserve, which is great, which means that you can basically take your watch off your wrist, leave it there for 3 days, put it back on your wrist, and it still keeps the time right. Plus it is COSC certified by the Swiss board, which means that it is a chronometer. In other words, this watch keeps time very well for those that aren't interested into the little details of the movement. Let's come to talk about how the watch actually wears, and that's kind of the downside for me personally, because I'm wearing my Tudor Pelagos today, and this is a 42mm watch as well, so technically both watches are the same size. However, they wear very, very differently. So this one, the P01, wears much bigger than my Tudor Pelagos, and that's obviously because of this huge lugs. I don't know what the actual lug to lug width is. I know that the lug width in and of itself is 20mm, which is great, but you don't really need that because I don't think anyone is going to change the strap on this watch. However, the lug to lug, so this dimension here, is very long, which makes it sit very huge on your wrist, and if you have a smaller wrist like me, it doesn't look that great. So who is this watch for? This watch is for men with bigger wrists, and although in this day and age most sports watches can be easily worn by women as well because of the mid sizes, I can definitely assure you that this watch is not one of them. This is definitely a man's watch because of the design and because of the size. This is such an industrial looking watch, and it's for people that like this kind of utilitarian look, for people that like tool watches, and also for people that like a casual industrial kind of look. So there are a few things that I don't really like about this watch, and part of it is definitely the huge lugs. I think they are just too big and make it difficult to wear for people with a smaller wrist like myself. I think it looks cool, but they are very big, and so it isn't that comfortable. Then the other big point for me personally, especially when I compare it to my Pelagos, is the loom. So the loom isn't that great for a Tudor, a modern day Tudor. I can appreciate that they wanted to give this vintage look with the faux patina, so this yellowish indices. However, the loom in of itself is not that great. But for the rest, I think it's a very cool looking piece, and my final thoughts on the watch are that this is a collectible piece. It is a collector's piece. It is definitely a conversation starter, and that's, for me as a watch enthusiast, is something that is very important. Wearing a watch that gets you into conversations with people that don't even like watches, because it looks so different, and you can be sure that people looking at your wrist will definitely notice this watch, because it's just so different from anything else. And that's what I like about Tudor. They don't care, they just did it. I mean, they have it in their slogan, born to dare. So they, if they have an idea, if they have a concept in mind, they just do it. They reissued this watch out of nowhere, and they just took the critics and the other people who love it. And I think it's a watch that may go up in value in a few years, because well, that's my cat. It may go up in value in a few years because it's just so different from anything else, and many people talked about this watch. Although some talked very badly about it, it doesn't matter. There is no thing such as bad publicity. So yeah, all in all, a very interesting piece. Now let me know down in the comments below what you think of this watch, whether you would get it or not. So that's it for the video today. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and see you next time. Ciao!